Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
Some speeds have been a little too high. We've had to warn a few people.
Complaints of boaters going just way too fast and putting kayakers in danger. Plus,
didn't think it was going to be this crazy, but it's absolutely insane.
Keeping a physical distance proves difficult during a beautiful long weekend. And
immediately went and checked, and of course there's no stickers on anything, so I just threw everything out.
It's time to check your pantry as more types of onions from the U.S. are being recalled.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. A beautiful summer-long weekend always means people are outside enjoying nature. But this summer is, of course, unique. With the threat of the pandemic looming, travel to far-flung places is virtually impossible. But as Stephanie Mercier reports, with so many people trying to stay close to home, local parks are filling up.
A sunny, long weekend means people flocking to trees and nature. Trouble is, they're escaping to the same places as everyone else. This Alberta trail was overrun.
Didn't think it was going to be this crazy, but it's absolutely insane.
Yeah, it's crazy busy. It's amazing how many people actually come and do this.
As soon as we went down to go do the hike, it was kind of madness down there. There was way too many people, and we just felt uncomfortable, so we ended up walking back up just because, I don't know, since there's a pandemic going on, it just feels weird to hike around 100 other people.
Elsewhere, it was beaches that were jammed. In an effort to control the number of people at any given place, lots of regions have been closing parking lots and turning people away, like in Prince Edward County, Ontario, and the lower mainland of BC.
Parking lot was full, so we had to turn around and find another parking spot. And now we're waiting for the bus.
We've been rerouted and now kind of trying to figure out what else we can do in the meantime so that we can get ourselves to the hike.
Have your confirmation on that?
BC has started issuing day use passes for some popular areas. But some suburban mayors say that's just pushing people to crowd into smaller local parks.
So we have to, as communities, try to figure out how to coordinate. And as local governments and the provincial government and the regional government, we ought to be coordinating to make sure that all of our facilities are open and that we can spread out this large number of residents that want to find the park, spread them out more.
To their point, just a few kilometers away,
it's quite empty. Yeah, there's usually a lot more people here, I would say. Quite a few boaters as usual, and it's been very, very pleasant.
I see good, social distance, everything is very good.
Showing there is still enough outdoor space to go around safely. Stephanie Mercier, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, after nearly 25 years in business, the pandemic is forcing a well-known gift shop to close. Lala's on Commercial Drive location is already closed, and its store in Deep Cove will be closing in the coming weeks because of COVID-19. Has made it difficult to sustain the store's curated shopping environment. Its owner has taken pride in supporting local artists and producers to feature their unique items.
I feel as though the government has done well for individuals. They've done well to incentivize multinationals, talking about airline industry, banking industries, oil and gas. They also have incentivized post-secondary students not to work this summer, but what they haven't done is they haven't incentivized small businesses to stay in business. We make up 40% of GDP, and if you're looking for a sling back in the economy, which is what we're all looking for, not just government, but each one of us wants that, it's best to keep us in business.
Lala's would have celebrated its 25th anniversary on September 1st. A small plane crash in Nelson sent 2 people to hospital with minor injuries after crash landing in a parking lot. The wing of the plane clipped a vehicle in the parking lot, but nobody else was hurt. In Nelson, the airstrip runs parallel to a road that separates the airport and a supermarket. The Transportation Safety Board has been alerted and has completed an initial investigation. While Burnaby's own Michael Bublé is set to become one of the latest inductees into the prestigious Order of British Columbia. He joins 12 other BC natives in the class of 2020. The province says 160 people were nominated in total. Other notable inductees include former BC Finance Minister Carol Taylor and BC Green Party co-founder Paul George. Well, you can't tell the story of British Columbia without its founder, James Douglas, but how you tell his story matters a great deal. Justin McElroy reports on a proposed new plaque that would note all aspects of Douglas's complicated legacy.
Look around this province, and pretty much everywhere you go, you'll find James Douglas. In parks and street signs, in schools, and more schools.
I think almost every historian in British Columbia believes if there'd been no James Douglas, there would be no British Columbia.
Jean Barman wrote the preeminent book on British Columbia, West Beyond the West. She's currently writing a book on Douglas's correspondence with Britain's colonial office in the years when the Hudson's Bay Company man was appointed the first governor of the mainland colony of British Columbia.
There's just 25 years between when the first non-Indigenous people, apart from some people in the fur trade, came into this territory and British Columbia was a province. It was essentially the colonial office in charge. They put their faith in Douglas.
We tell the story of Douglas the same way we tell the story of John A. Macdonald or George Washington, the founding figure of British Columbia. But just like Washington and Macdonald, the way we tell Douglas's story is beginning to change.
I see him as kind of a beachhead where his ship came to the shore and established kind of a placement of the colonial marker, which had a detrimental impact on Indigenous people.
Brandon Gabriel is a Kwantlen artist and former historical researcher with the Kwantlen First Nation, whose members lived in the area for centuries before Fort Langley and James Douglas's arrival.
Their presence as a colonizing force wasn't met with on agreeable terms, and so, to put it nicely,
the record is clear. Douglas did have a huge part in diminishing and displacing BC's Indigenous populations. But there are reasons why campaigns to diminish his legacy haven't been as large as other colonizing figures.
It was like, oh, by the way, James Douglas was mixed race and black. And I'm like, oh, I didn't really know that.
Langley councillor Nathan Pahal wants to remember Douglas with a new display in Douglas Park. Like Douglas, Pahal is half black. And at a time when statues to colonizers are being taken down, he thinks a plaque for Douglas can go up.
A plaque acknowledging history is a lot different than a statue as well. And so I really want people to understand the complex history of this province and to celebrate the positive attributes and also acknowledge the horrific things that happened as well. And I think we can do both.
Whether that's true or not will be seen in the next year. The city will consult with both Black Lives Matter groups and the Kwantlen First Nation on the plaque. And the framework of BC history has often been fraught for Indigenous people.
The telling of the story of the making of this country and this province is largely has been developed by the colonizing forces.
It's a tension at the heart of the story of Douglas. Half black, husband of a Cree woman, the dominant treaty maker and colonizer in BC history.
He did center Indigenous people almost all the way through his life, but you have to, it's how you tell the stories.
The story of Douglas is one we'll continue to retell, but how we tell it will say as much about us as it does him. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Fort Langley.
Well, one of the spots filling up locally in BC for those looking to get away this long weekend has been Deep Cove. And while there have been concerns over a repeat of cases surging this long weekend, Deb Goebel reports as people have been doing their best behavior.
Take months of being stuck inside, throw in a perfect summer day and a long weekend, and it seemed anyone who could headed out onto the water today.
You know, some of the big boats are not careful. They both think they come close to the kayaker and it make problem with the kayaker, a little bit dangerous.
There's not a rental to be had at Deep Cove Kayaks this morning. And there's just one important rule when it comes to speedboaters.
No swamping.
The kayakers, the speedboaters, the canoeists, the paddleboarders, they've all been out since early this morning.
On general, they are good. And there are, 90%, 95% of good.
It takes it away from it a little bit sometimes, especially when the cove is just jam-packed with boats.
Still, the RCMP Marine Unit says, for the most part, boaters have been acting responsibly this summer.
The little human-powered ones have the right of way, so the paddle boards, kayaks, obviously swimmers, because they don't have the ability to maneuver that a powerboat does.
There haven't been any major incidents in the cove. The odd paddleboarder or canoeist has maybe been tipped into the water, but it's only when you get out into open water that speed becomes more of a problem.
Well, most people operate their vessels safely, some more so than others. Not a lot of complaints.
And with RCMP marine units from North Van and Coquitlam, along with the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue, and of course the Coast Guard all out there, playing by the rules is always a good idea.
Even if they just kind of go out there and sometimes they flash their lights, or even just people seeing the boat on the water really helps to reduce like the speeding.
Coexisting on the water is what boating is all about. There's always going to be the odd, too loud party boat, or maybe a wake-spewing speedboat getting just that little bit too close. But for the most part, it's been a pretty good summer so far. Deborah Goebel, CBC News, North Vancouver.
The recall of onions from the United States has been expanded. It now includes red, yellow, white, and sweet onions from the brand Thompson International in California. At least 120 people in 7 provinces are sick, and 17 were sent to hospital. CBC's Susanna De Silva now with what you need to know.
Better safe than sorry is the mindset of this small grocer waiting to confirm from their supplier these onions are safe.
They said that if you have any red onions, just bring them in the back and you have to throw them out.
A salmonella outbreak linked to some California red onions is now a recall of all varieties of onions from the same company.
I immediately went and checked, and of course there's no stickers on anything, so I just threw everything out, just to be on the safe side.
People began getting sick in the middle of June. 120 cases in Canada so far. 17 people have been hospitalized. In the United States, there are close to 400 cases. The onions have been sold across Canada under the names El Competidor, Imperial Fresh, Onions 52, Tender Loving Care, and Thompson International. But if you're like me, when you get your onions home, you take them out of the bag and put them in your handy onion box. And some of them were also sold in bulk, which may mean you have no idea where your onions have come from. So officials say, when in doubt, throw them out.
Cooking will kill it for definite. I think the big risk is that because people you don't associate onions with salmonella, is that when they've got a cutting board, for example, they'll peel the onion, they'll cut it up, and then they'll put something down on that cutting board.
In California, the source of the contamination is still unknown, but experts say likely either from the soil or contaminated water. As the state deals with droughts, water is being brought in from further away.
There's less investment in food safety in the United States than a few years ago. And talk about COVID right now, farmers are under a lot of pressure to produce.
Back in Vancouver, this grocer got confirmation that these onions were grown in Washington, and its supplier says they're safe. But that isn't enough to convince everyone to pick some up. Are you going to hold off on buying onions for a while?
Probably for a little while until I hear anything else in the news.
The Public Health Agency of Canada is also advising those ordering from restaurants to check where its onions are from. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
The police are allowed to use a fairly high level of force, and I think that's where there's a disconnect.
Allegations of police brutality have made headlines in recent months, but how rare are they? Coming up, the RCMP's response. With police brutality in the spotlight, the RCMP has revealed its use of force figures to CBC News. It says instances where it was improperly applied over the past 5 years were rare. But as Olivia Stefanovich tells us, those calling for more accountability say the small figure doesn't tell the whole story.
These are just some of the recent incidents that led to allegations of improper use of force by Canada's National Police Service. The RCMP tells CBC News in 99% of complaints over the past 5 years, their officers were in the right.
The police are allowed to use a fairly high level of force, and I think that's where there's a disconnect.
The question comes down to whether an officer's actions are reasonable in the face of a perceived threat.
Very few people call the police to invite them over for a piece of cake because they won the Lotto 649. The police respond to conflict.
Some say the way police evaluate that response is a problem, and the police definition of improper use of force too narrow.
How did they decide what is improper and what is not improper?
This former police board chair says there needs to be a new definition, overseen by an outside body, independently investigating all complaints.
This task cannot be done by an internal body.
Experts say an independent body may also eliminate people's fear of filing a complaint, which could partly explain the low number.
They may worry about retaliation. They may worry that their voice won't be accepted, that their perspective will not be affirmed.
There's also calls for better training. Some officers only get a few hours each year to refresh their skills on how to act in potentially volatile situations.
That would dramatically reduce the amount of controversial use of force episodes that we're witnessing today.
He says if people want police behavior to change, then the laws will need to spell out what they're allowed to do. The public safety minister is working on updating standards to rebuild eroded trust between the public and those empowered to police them. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Quebec is reporting 123 new cases and 2 deaths linked to COVID-19. But starting today, the province is increasing the number of people allowed to attend indoor and outdoor gatherings. As many as 250 people can now gather indoors, a big jump from the previous limit of 50. The plan was announced nearly 2 weeks ago in an effort to reopen venues such as theaters, cinemas, and places of worship. A 10-person limit remains in place for private gatherings, such as in homes and chalets. People are still advised to maintain physical distance from each other and follow health guidelines. Well, at least 36 crew members and 4 passengers on a Norwegian cruise ship have tested positive for COVID-19. The ship was carrying about 200 passengers and 160 crew members when it arrived at a port north of the Arctic on Friday. All guests were ordered to self-isolate after disembarking, and those who tested positive were taken to hospital. Passengers have expressed frustration that they didn't find out about crew members being infected until after they had left the ship. The cruise line has now halted all trips, and it apologized today for what it called procedural errors. Our municipal affairs reporter Justin McElroy takes BC Day to the next level. Yep, that's him rocking 162 pins representing each municipality in our province. Why and how that all came to be after the break. Here's a live shot of False Creek in Science World. What a gorgeous day out there. Johanna will have your full forecast next.
In the news tonight, a Soviet freighter has collided with a British Columbia ferry in the Strait of Georgia. 500 people were on board the ferry when the collision occurred this afternoon in a tricky passage known as Active Pass. 3 people on board the ferry were killed, one of them a 7-month-old baby. A 4th person is believed dead.
It was like a knife through butter. The Queen of Victoria was struck just forward of amidships on her port side. The impact opened a gash 30 feet high from her upper promenade deck, almost to the waterline. The ferry did not ship any water during or after the collision. The gaping hole in her side stopped inches above the rubber collision retainer around her hull. The other ship was the Sergei Yasini of Russian registry. She's a 12,000-tonner and apart from a missing anchor, showed no signs of damage. The ferry, which was carrying 500 passengers, 150 cars, and a crew of 40, made her way back to the Sawasan terminal 20 miles south of Vancouver. She'd left there at 11 this morning. The collision occurred an hour later. There are no reports of injuries aboard the Sergei Yasinin. She was due to arrive in Vancouver late this evening, and so far there's been no contact with her since the collision. A gaggle of onlookers and police were at the Sawasan terminal when the Queen of Victoria arrived. A spokesman for BC Ferries says there's been no accurate estimate of the damage to the ferry. It may run as high as $50,000. It was a scene of total destruction at the point of impact. The ferry's bulwarks and frame were smashed like kindling. Cars were stacked up like cordwood. It's believed that most of the people killed and injured were in their cars when the collision occurred, although some of the minor injuries were reported to have come from the passenger deck just above the car storage area. Meantime, the Queen of Victoria is to be taken to dry dock in Vancouver for repairs. The passengers were permitted to disembark after an hour of police questioning. Many of them were aware that the Russian freighter was approaching the ferry through Active Pass near Victoria, but few thought that there'd be, in fact, a collision.
I was sitting in the cafeteria and I could see him coming from a long way off, and we were just joking around. We said, if he keeps coming, he's going to hit us. And they just kept going, and they just eventually came and met.
Did you know that anybody had been hurt at the time?
I think one died.
Yeah, I heard somebody yell, a man yelling around, looking for a doctor, and said his wife had been hurt and his baby's been hurt.
Cut off from the shattered glass.
Yeah. How high were they? Those people sitting on the car deck, or were they up top, or what?
We were asleep in the car deck when the boat hit, and all we heard was a big boom, and came flying out of the camper, and all the cars in front of us were crunched up, and we didn't know what happened, so we just ran up top, and everybody's running around putting life jackets on, and weren't sure. Then we saw the big boat out the front.
I was sitting in the front of the boat, and I saw the ship just slowly pass by, and I thought, oh, they're just going to miss us. And then all of a sudden, bang, right sort of in the mid-center, it struck.
Did it scare you?
Well, a lot of people panicked and that sort of thing. You know, there's a lot of children screaming, and old ladies were falling in that. You sort of had to assist other people, and especially put on their life jackets and that sort of thing. It was very disorganized even afterwards, you know.
11 people who were less seriously injured were taken to hospitals in Richmond and Delta for treatment.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell. Here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
What is gender identity? What does non-binary mean? Subscribe to the CBC BC original podcast, They and Us, and join host Will Fundell as they explore these questions and more. And in honor of Pride, we're highlighting people from the LGBTQ community in BC making a difference. Browse through all the amazing individuals at cbc.ca/proudtoshinebc.
The weather update is brought to you by Fortis BC. Using more energy these days? We've got energy-saving tips, easy upgrades, how-to videos, and more.
Meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now for a look at the forecast. Joe, I love that you're also wearing red. Sunny long
yellow,
weekend,
but,
yeah.
You know,
did I say red? Yellow. You know what? It's been one of those. I'm still long weekend mode. Thanks for that. I love how you're wearing yellow. I had a great long weekend. I hope you did too.
I also had a great long weekend, and I also think great minds channeling, you know, the yellow end of the spectrum. I knew what you meant. Red is in the same spectrum as yellow, so you were really ahead of the game there. But it does feel like a very summer holiday mode. I know that someone is very happy. We're on a half-hour show waiting for me in the sidelines over there as the little guy. It has been a beautiful long weekend. We actually had a few showers last night for Metro Vancouver, but because it's so dry, most of it evaporated before it touched the ground. I know you were looking up Virga last night. So Virga is when we don't see that rain touch the ground, and that's basically what happened across Metro Vancouver. Look what we've got behind us. Gorgeous building cumulus. Enough of the clouds, though. Let's get to the fire danger rating, because that is the other side to this long weekend. We've had a beautiful long weekend so far in Metro Vancouver, but fire danger rating is still high to extreme. We had 27 new fire starts over the past couple of days with a cold front that swept through that very hot air. Most of the new fires in the southern interior, and we are still seeing lightning strikes this evening in through Prince George, getting ready to cross the Rockies. So new fire starts not out of the question. And I should mention the BC fire centers crediting the public for spotting smoke and flames and reporting it. And that's why they were really able to stay on top of the situation over the weekend. So they're thanking the public and asking people to stay vigilant as we head into what is another hot forecast. 23 and through YVR right now. That northwesterly wind, though, is fresh. It is nice to feel a different flow than that hot southerly one we've been getting into. Still hot, though, in through the southern interior for tomorrow and as we head into Wednesday. And look at that, Vancouver. Our temperatures really start to build as well over the next couple of days. Taking you to the systems map, just a slight chance of some morning fog in through Metro Vancouver. Patchy through the morning, I think will burn off nicely, keeping the sun for your Tuesday and Wednesday forecast. But look what begins to approach for Thursday. I am going to have to put some rain in, I think, at this point coming in Wednesday night into Thursday morning, lingering through Thursday. We do need it, though. Probably notice things are looking very dry, and we dry right back out for a very good-looking weekend. Don't think it's too early to think about next weekend or what we'll be wearing next weekend, Tina.
I know that color. I'm going to go work on my color wheel, but you look lovely in yellow. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks, Joe. All right, well, did you know there are 162 municipalities in BC? Our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy, knows that for certain because he's collected or made pins for all of them. That's right, all of them. To celebrate this BC Day, here's a look at how his collection came to be.
I'm Justin McElroy. I'm CBC Vancouver's municipal affairs reporter. Over the last year, I've collected pins for every single municipality in British Columbia. Funny, I did not care about municipal pins or pins at all. A woman who lives on Vancouver Island, without prompting, sent me like 30 pins from different municipalities that she had gathered over the years. I was, number one, amazed at how different all of these pins were, how they captured sort of the geography or the economy or history of a place, how some of them were really funnily designed. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know, nobody's collected pins for every municipality. I wonder if I could do it. And then, you know, way too much money went down the drain. In two situations, I searched far and wide. I talked to a lot of people. There were no pins whatsoever. So I did the only logical thing, which is to ask a friend to design pins for them. But pins were too expensive, so instead they're buttons. So we have the only known buttons representing Jumbo Glacier and Canal Flats as part of this. No one in the world has this collection. Lots of people could have a lot of BC pins, but having one from every single municipality, I don't think so. Like, you look at the evolution of the pins and how different all of them are, and you can see some of them were made in the 60s and 70s and are more colorful or quirky. You know, some of them are very corporate, essentially a business card put on a pin. There's some that are just dinosaurs. It's just a neat window into the different parts of this province and the things people care about. I'm glad I did it. Just finding all of these pins and having sort of the joy and surprise of opening it up and seeing what it looks like was the thing that was the neatest about it. I could put them behind a glass case or whatever and put it on my wall or something, but that seems less fun than bringing out the jacket, you know, 10 or 15 times a year and having silly conversations.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.